in this event. So yes, thank you so much for everybody joining us. We just want to acknowledge that as well. For questions coming out of the event, you can reach us via email as well. So without much ado, I would like to immediately bring on board our guest, I would call him the keynote speaker for today, Dr. Albert Zeufack. One of the things we've done for each of our speakers, I tell you, they're the most brilliant minds when it comes to Africa. So whatever we share about them today will not do justice. You can actually find their full profile on the network. But I also want to personally say a big thank you to Dr. Albert Zeufack for joining us today. I know he's in the middle of the World Bank and planning the World Bank annual events, annual meetings. So he's going to just join us and help us kick this off. He was also one of the key people that helped kick off the annual Trade with Africa Business Summit that we held back in 2018, flying in from DC. And I know I was just talking to him before we kicked off this event, but I just want to say thank you again. And Dr. Zeufack, I want to say thank you for the 2 books you gave me that time that, the African Union published. Those books have made me for sure smarter. So I'm super excited to welcome you, sir, Dr. Albert Zeufack, the Chief Economist on Africa at the World Bank. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Toyin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. So it is indeed a pleasure and honor for me to open this event. And, over the years, I've learned that what Toyin does is to bring people together, but always to impact Africa, to impact the development of Africa. And whenever I can, I step in and just lend a little hand. So thank you so much, Toyin, for what you do for Africa. Thank you so much for inviting me today. This is about the Continental Free Trade Agreement. And just to give you a sense of how important that is, I'm going to start with a story. In 1957, when Kwame Nkrumah was just taking over and ruling Ghana, he invited the first and only one Black person to have ever won the Nobel Prize in Economics, Sir Arthur Lewis. Arthur Lewis came and advised Nkrumah in Ghana from 1957 to 59, left and came back briefly in 1963. But the reason why Arthur Lewis left is because it didn't go that well with Nkrumah. And the reason why it didn't go well is because Nkrumah was already, those days, thinking of what it would take to create a single continental market. Nkrumah was arguing that in the first Ghanaian plan in 1957, they have to put the basis for infrastructure that would cut across till the east of Africa. And as an economist, Arthur Lewis looked at the budget constraints for Ghana and said, sir, you cannot do it. It will not work. And he was looking at it from an pure economics perspective. They didn't see eye to eye, obviously. Lewis left, very disappointed. And Nkrumah was very disappointed about Economist as well. But the moral of that story for me is, both of them were actually right. Both were right. Nkrumah was just right too early. And today is a clear proof that Nkrumah was right. That idea of a single Africa continental market is what we're talking about today. And our leaders have actually gathered to make it happen on paper, but it would take a lot of work to make it happen. Arthur Lewis was right, because if we do not take into account all the constraints, all the fiscal risk, all the fiscal space issues, we may never be able to make it happen in reality. So we have to bring all of this together. And the reason why it's even more important to look at those, those two stories, one, the dream, the other, the reality of things, is we are facing unprecedented times. Africa, just like the rest of the world, is facing a huge challenge. These are unusual times. With COVID-19, Africa is bearing the severe cost of this pandemic. In 2 days, my office will be launching the Africa's Pulse, which is our macroeconomic outlook. And we'll be discussing how this pandemic is impacting African economies. And it's very, very severe. So one thing that came with COVID is a sudden stop in trade. So you may be asking yourself, what are we talking about? We're discussing trade at a time where we had a sudden stop in trade. COVID has actually told us how irrelevant trade could be. No, to the contrary. To the contrary, because what COVID has taught us is basically that Africa was right in adopting and embracing trade at the time the rest of the world was raising barriers. That was foresight, and that was smart. And when I'm looking at the numbers, the proof that it was smart is coming out of East Africa, where countries have actually increased their trade during COVID, which basically leads me to an important point, which is trade has moved in the past 20 years from trade in goods to trade in parts. We talk about value chains. Trade has become integration into different value chains. And what is missing, and what I'm hoping the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement can do, is to help us building those intra-Africa regional value chains. Because those will be absolutely protected from the volatility and global trade uncertainties. But I'm not going to tell you, to this audience, what the Continental Free Trade Agreement is. And, you know, Jean, I see Bertrand on this panel, I see Landry, maybe, you know, they will be telling you a little bit even more about it. But this goal to have a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of people and investment is clearly something that would pave the way for accelerating African economic growth and prosperity. You know, that single market is 1.3 billion people. It's 55 economies. And together is basically more than the GDP of India, right? And it's roughly the same population. So start thinking of Africa, not through the thick barriers, not through the thick borders that separate our small nations, but as that single continental platform where we could be exchanging products. A couple of years ago, I was speaking at an event and I said, when I think of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, the image that comes to me is simple. Why can't we use cotton produced in Mali, rubber produced in Cameroon, to make sneakers that would be sold in South Africa and advertised by Kenyan runners and Ethiopian marathon runners? Why can't we start thinking in those terms? Why can't we think of what it would take to actually locate the firm, the plant in the area, in the space that would lead to the highest productivity and hire the maximum number of people? These are questions that we would have to address, but these are also huge opportunities. I think what has been a serious problem, and it's been talked about quite extensively, is that intra-Africa trade is extremely low. By some accounts, for the entire subcontinent, it's like 17%. It's probably lower in Western Africa, or even lower again in Central Africa than it is in Southern Africa, where South Africa trades a little bit more with neighbors. But by and large, we're the continent that trade the least with neighbors. And that is clearly something we should change. So what we have seen, and through studies, is that through intra-regional trade, we can actually achieve huge gains. And, the share of Africa's merchandise export within the continent, which is very low, has actually increased in the last decade. It's actually gone up from 10% of exports in 2010 to 19% of export in 2017. These are the World Trade Organization numbers. So the Continental Free Trade Agreement signals the rising ambition of this region for faster growth through trade and integration. And the gains can be huge. We should clearly expect to go beyond the traditional welfare analysis, where most important benefits derive from the dynamic gains associated with, increased competition, FDI inflows, economies of scale, transfer of knowledge and technology, increased productivity, economic diversification. These are all the things economists list as the benefit of a successful integration. But we must go beyond it, as I was saying. Integration will be successful in Africa if not only we achieve physical integration on breaking down the non-traditional and the non-tariff barriers, but also when we get to free movement of people. And I'm here calling on the African Union and others, implement that African passport, please. I was told last time I asked the question, oh, it's working, we've delivered it to head of states. Well, sorry, they don't need it. Business people need it to create those factories, to create those jobs for the African youth. that desperately need them. So this is the kind of challenge that we face. Yes, the technician in me wants to get deep into the technicalities of rules of origins, wants to get into the technicalities of, common external tariff, wants to get into the benefit of, liberalization and competitiveness, But I think I just want to step back a little bit here and say, why? Why not us? Why not us? I've spent a lot of time working for countries around the world. At some point in my career, I actually stopped working for the World Bank and I went to work for a government in Asia. And for 4 years, I advised the Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister of Malaysia. I ran the Sovereign Wealth Fund. One thing that kept coming back to me was, gosh, I thought these people were so much smarter than Africans, and that's why they're going that far. No. I realized that these were ordinary people. Ordinary people were doing extraordinary things. I'm here challenging you, challenging this audience, to be those ordinary people who would do extraordinary things for Africa. Because at the end of the day, that's what it is. The notion that Africa lacks talent, the notion that Africa lacks capacity, it's completely bogus. Not when we decide to be those ordinary people who do extraordinary things for our countries, but even more so now for our continent, who will not actually be moving. So what I would like to do in closing is just to basically say, look, my office has produced work trying to quantify most of the benefit of this Continental Free Trade Agreement. And there are two results that I want to leave with you. One is, at this stage, what we have done is progress on the on removing or lowering, trade barriers, but that's the tariff discussions. But tariffs are not where the gains would come from. And there is a very, very simple result that shows actually that most of the tariffs that we are discussing, actually 90% of all those tariffs are within 10 tariff lines. So as countries negotiate and discuss exclusions from that list, if we're not careful, at the end of the day, nothing will happen. If each country is actually just decide to exclude those few lines where most of our trades is concentrated, at the end of the day, we will not achieve anything. So that we need to have in mind. But the second important result is that the impact of this agreement will actually come from trade, expansion, job creation, and poverty reduction. But that will not come without free movement of people. So as we embark in this discussion, and my office works quite well, and we work a lot with the Secretary of the Continental Free Trade Agreement, and the Secretary General of the AfCFTA. It's going to be on a panel that I'm organizing the week of the 19th. We're working with them, trying to provide as much support as possible for technical analysis, but at the end of the day, it's about leadership. Leadership at the top of our nations, but also leadership at the individual level when we decide to be those ordinary people who are determined to do extraordinary things for Africa. Africa would become that exceptional place and that extraordinary place that we all want it to be. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you so much, sir. Such an incredible presentation, and thank you for helping us to open this. I completely agree with you in terms of, as individuals, making sure that we're engaged and we're part of the movement to transform Africa. And one of the things I try to say is when people say Africa is rising, I say Africa cannot rise until Africans rise up to their responsibility and take a leadership role in terms of transforming Africa. Sir, before I let you go, you wanted to say something, sir?
No, I just wanted to say thank you, and really my apologies. I really would have loved to stay on and have this debate, these questions as well, but it's going to be for another time. I have to rush to another meeting. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, sir. I'm going to move on now. You can edit. So just so everybody is aware, this week is preparations for the World Bank annual meetings. So even for us to have been able to get Dr. Albert to join us today was literally a miracle. So if you do have any questions for Dr. Albert, still drop it. I'll be able to channel that back and working with his office as well. So I'm going to move on to our next speaker. So let me share that with you. Our next speaker is Mr. John Bertrand Azapmo. He's the principal advisor to His Excellency Ambassador Muchanga, the African Union Commissioner for Trade and Industry. If you're just joining us, when we started, I made sure to share that the full bio of each of our speakers is actually shared at the Trade with Africa network on the network. So you can access that. But right now, I want to acknowledge that Mr. Jean was with us here in Chicago a year ago with His Excellency Ambassador Albert Muchanga, and they did give us a keynote address on the AfCFTA, what it is, and this is an opportunity for us to really just check in with them and see how far, what progress has been made, what does the timeline look like, what should we all be considering over the next couple of months. So Jean, such a pleasure again to see you here. You do have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Tohin. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for your kind invitation. I think, like Dr. Albert said, it's always a pleasure to be part of these conversations that you put together with a view to sensitizing the stakeholders, getting the message across, with the understanding that development is a do-it-yourself issue, and Africans, if Africa has to develop, then Africans, wherever they find themselves, will have to play a role in that respect. So we, at the African Union Commission, we value what you do, and in as much as we can, we will always make ourselves available. So I was asked to share my thoughts on three main issues. The current state of implementation of the AfCFTA, the timelines of activities, and what we should be expecting over the next 2 years. But before I do that, let me just go back a little bit, and I think I'll just touch briefly on some of the things that Dr. Zeufack discussed, which is the why, because it is very important that us Africans, we understand why this is so critical to us I will just cover 4 main points. First of all, we are coming from a situation where we literally have a fragmented 55 uncompetitive market. So when you look at the African landscape, you're looking at those small markets. Because even if you take a country like Nigeria, right, with about 200 million inhabitants, that's massive from, an African perspective. But then when you position yourself in the international arena, is very little, right? And we are also looking at disjointed market. Dr. Zeufack talked about, complementarity, lack of complementarity among African economies, as substantiated or evidenced by the low level of intra-African trade. And we're also looking at, very underperforming countries. He also discussed the share of intra-African trade, whether in terms of export of goods or in terms of export of services. There's been a decline. Actually, few people know that back in 1948, Africa's share of world trade was 8%. But today we are literally below 3%. And also looking at GDP per capita on the continent, it has also declined. So we actually looking at a framework that will help transform the continent. This is what we are looking at. So it is therefore very important that we get it right, and that we also that we rally everyone around the project. This is very important, because at the end of the day, it has to be people driven. Gone are the days where policy were crafted at the top, implemented, with some level of success, and with people at the grassroots level just watching. No, it's no longer that time. People at the grassroots level, ordinary Africans, whether on the continent or in the diaspora, they have a role to play. And this is the message that we really want to send across. So coming to the state of implementation, as you probably know, when we talked about the AfCFTA regime today, we're talking about the framework agreement. We're talking about 2 protocols, one in trading services and the other on trading goods. Of course, trading services for the time being is only covering 5 priority sectors, but there is an understanding that those sectors will be expanded. We're currently looking at business and professional services. We're looking at communication services, financial services, tourism services, and transport services. There was a question in the chat about transport services. I think I answered that question. So that's the AfCFTA framework. Now we are in a situation where countries are already preparing the market access offers. So basically, you have a framework, a legal framework, but what you actually need, what you need is what is called market access offers, which is basically commitment undertaken by countries to liberalize certain goods within a time frame. In the case of the AfCFTA, we are looking at 10 years for developing countries and 13 years for least developed countries. So that's what we're looking at. And those market access offers are actually crafted taking into consideration what is known as the harmonized coding system, which is it's a framework prepared by the World Customs Organizations, which describes all the goods that you can think of on Earth. So basically, the countries are currently preparing those market access offers. As of now, we have 7 offers which have been submitted, covering 12 countries, because some offers have been submitted in the context of customs, existing customs unions, like countries from the CEMAC, which is the Economic and Monetary Community for Central African States. So they've submitted 1 offers. Other countries are still working on their offers. And here we are looking at liberalizing 90% of trade. So that's with respect to trade in goods. In terms of trade in services, which is very, very important, as alluded to earlier by Dr. Zeufack, we've now moved to what is known as servicification of trade, because trade in services is now playing a very important role in even in facilitating the production of goods and also the trade of goods. Logistics today, digital trade will not be anything today without logistics. So when it comes to trade in services, we also have a number of countries that have submitted their schedule of specific commitment. We have 9 of them, and like I said, there is ongoing work, across the continent to finalize those schedule of tariff concessions for trade in goods and list of specific commitment for trade in services. And like I also indicated earlier, we are looking at 5 priority sectors, but with the understanding that those will be expanded to cover additional, the remaining services sectors, which are known in the international trade classification. In addition to the agreement and its annexes, which I've discussed, we're also looking at AfCFTA operational instruments, which were launched in Niamey during the 12th Extraordinary Summit. And one of them is very critical. I think Dr. Zeufack also talked about issues pertaining to that instrument, which are non-tariff barriers. So what is happening is that, mindful of the fact that tariffs are actually, the list of the trade restrictions hindering intra-African trade compared to non-tariff barriers, African countries have agreed to establish what is known as the NTB monitoring, reporting and elimination mechanism, that is non-tariff barriers. And this instrument was developed with some of our partners, in particular UNCTAD, and it is already operational, so it's already live. And through this mechanism, what will happen is that if a trader, if an exporter or importer faces, let's say, unexpected non-tariff restrictions, he will be able to report, to launch a report through that mechanism, and the report will then be disseminated to be channeled to the official of the country concerned.
Sean, did we lose you? Komi, can you hear me? Is it just me or is it on Jean's side?
I think it's on Jean's side because I can hear you clearly.
Okay, let me reach him on his phone. Yes, I'm going to try and reach him on his phone. If I'm not able to, we'll move on to the next speaker and come back to him, but just give me a moment, please. Okay, he has let me know that he's reconnecting. So if we could just give him a few more minutes. Internet's in Addis. So he's going to join us briefly. Thank you, everyone.
Hello?
Thank you. Awesome. Yes, we can hear you now. I did let everybody know that but you and I were in contact. So thank you. Go on.
Yes. Sorry. I think this is one of the reasons why we need to fast track the AfCFTA, especially when it comes to trade and services, with commitment in the communication sector, So I was talking about the African Trade Observatory, which is also completed using mirror data. So we'll have 2 modules under the Trade Observatory, the Explore module and the Compare module. Now, what the Trade Observatory will do is it will also address one of the non-tariff barriers that we usually encounter when it comes to intra-African trade. And this is the lack of information, because we are living in a knowledge economy, right? And information, data is the key. Data is the fuel. But when it comes to intra-African trade, there is very little information on business opportunities. So to the point where one exporter in country A rarely knows what is going on in country B, and they end up importing or exporting from outside the continent. So the African Trade Observatory will address that gap by providing real-time trade and trade-related information and data on intra-African trade. And so this is also very important. Now, what we need to get from the member state going forward is to provide us with the data, because like I said, the data we're currently using is mirror data, which means it's not data provided by government officials, and therefore there could be some gap in that data. So that's with respect to the Trade Observatory. The other instrument is the online negotiations tool, which is also completed, and countries that have submitted their offers have been using it, and others will also be using it as they complete their schedule of tariff concessions. And then we have the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System, which is also being completed by the Afrexim Bank. Actually, the pilot phase will take place in West Africa, covering UMOA countries, and the system will gradually be expanded to the rest of the continent. Another critical instrument that we are also putting in place is the AfCFTA Adjustment Facility. Now, this is very important because we've heard this again and again when it comes to the African private sector trading with the rest of the world. That is, the productive capacity is weak. So as a result, there is an adjustment facility that has been put in place by the Afrexim Bank. $1 billion US, 500 million will be to support AfCFTA member state who may face financial losses or who may encounter some challenges in implementing the agreement. And 500 million will be made available to the African private sector, who would want to take advantage of the AfCFTA market. Now, in terms of the timelines of activities, so we are currently undertaking a number of activities following a roadmap that was adopted by African ministers of trade when they last met on September 30th. That was just last week. And there are quite a few number of activities. Actually, it's a heavy roadmap, and you can understand why, because we are leading towards the extraordinary summit, which will make the final determination on the start of trading, which is also set for the 1st January 2021. So national consultations to finalize market access offers and schedule of specific commitment are ongoing in a number of countries and customs union. There will also be a stakeholder engagement leading to the summit. One of the main activities would be this joint ministerial meeting with the participation of all the stakeholders. And I think on that occasion, we are very likely to invite some representative from the diaspora to be part of it. We are looking at the 13th Extraordinary Summit on the AfCFTA in South Africa. That will be on December 5th. And then we're looking at the start of trading under the AfCFTA preferential regime on 1st January 2021. So in between, there would be a lot of activities, a lot of stakeholder engagement. And like I said, we appreciate Toyin and her organization, in putting one of those activities. Now, what is critical at this point is to understand that when trade starts on 1st January, it will be a market-driven process. First come, first serve. And our hope is that, like I said, Africans in the diaspora are part of this. They are part of this initiative. That they are part of this new adventure. And I say this because other stakeholders outside the continent are getting ready. And the question is, what are Africans on the continent doing? And least Africans in the diaspora. We've watched the news over the past couple of months, what was going on in quite a few number of countries regarding the African diaspora, and it pains us. But at the same time, looking at what we are doing on the continent, we are comforted that we are creating opportunities for all Africans, and we would like to see them coming back to take advantage of that, for us to collectively build the Africa we want by 2063. So what should we watch out over the next 2 years? After trade start on January 1st, of course, we will be looking at deepening the AfCFTA liberalization with a view to achieving an ambitious integrated market. Currently, we are looking at when it comes to trade in goods, we are looking at 90% liberalization, but we would like to achieve 100%. So there will be a discussion on some of the issues Dr. Zeufack talked about, sensitive list, exclusion list, to make sure that countries use them in a way that do not frustrate the AfCFTA market, because it will be useless to put all the actual trade in the sensitive list or in the exclusion list, rather than liberalizing them. So this is something that we are going to work with the member state. And we are going to broaden the scope of trade in services to the remaining services sector. That's also something that is going to happen. Discussion on other key elements that will make the AfCFTA really something novel, not a traditional AfCFTA will also be discussed. And here we're talking about intellectual property right, we're talking about investment, we're talking about e-commerce. And we will also look at implementing critical programs to help harness the AfCFTA potential, whether it's about implementing the African Union SME development strategy to ensure that African SMEs, which account for 80% of African businesses, are well equipped to be part of the AfCFTA adventure, whether it's prioritizing digital trade and e-commerce, which holds a lot of potential. We've seen this during the COVID. And what is also important is there would be this shift, the shift that we've started, that is to move from a state-centric development approach towards a more multi-partnership development approach, will continue and further expand. So we will bring on board all the other stakeholders, in particular from the private sector, the civil society, to play a critical role in advancing the AfCFTA. Let me conclude with a few things that will be required to make the AfCFTA work. Of course, A few number of them were discussed by Dr. Zeufack. But let me just highlight what we think are of critical importance. The very first one is mindset change. It is time for us Africans to be a bit more faithful. I know Africans are religious people, but we lack the faith. As the Bible said, if you had faith, just a little bit, like this, you will be able to tell to this mountain move, and it will move. I think that's what Dr. Zeufack was saying, when he alluded to, ordinary Africans, but doing extraordinary things. We need to believe that we can make this happen, and we will make it happen, as we've seen in the process we've gone through so far. So that's the very first thing, because at the end of the day, development is a do it yourself. Our partners around the world will help us, in as much as they can, but at the end of the day, it will be us Africans making this work, and we have to be mindful of it. Secondly, we need to embrace innovation and technology adaptation. We've seen it again and again when Africans really put their innovation spirit, their genius to task. They are able to confront some of the challenges, which sometimes are thought to be unsurmountable. When you come to think about the financial services, the way we know it in the Western world, very few people knew that Africa will achieve a high rate of financial inclusion today. But look at what M-Pesa did in Kenya, and it's now all over the continent, and even it has been imported, by other countries outside the continent. So we just need to, take advantage of innovation, the technology, to come up with solutions in order to address our own problems. The other thing is the need for, and this is with respect to our private sector, whether on the continent or in the diaspora, it is to look at the other private sector, our other colleagues, as partners. 80% of African businesses are SMEs. And when you look at the AfCFTA market, 1.27 billion consumer, it's huge. Very few SMEs, very few African businesses will be able to tap into that market or to stand the competition. So it is time to envisage joint ventures, partnerships. This is going to be critical. We need to be looking at establishing ventures across countries, whether in order to produce or to move goods from one place to the other. So this is going to be very, very important. And finally, there would be a need to consider the sustainability aspect of business taking place in the AfCFTA market. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about profit. It's about people. It's about our planet, because this is the only place we have. And we will be looking, especially in the context of the investment protocol, we will be looking at some of the very important provisions to ensure that investment, trade taking place on the continent, that those businesses that will be operating in the continent, they really put sustainability at the heart of their operations. So I leave it here, and I thank you once again for the invitation. I will stay for the Q&A session, and but already if there are questions in the chat, I'll also entertain them. Otherwise, thank you so much for the opportunity, Toyin.
Wow, thank you. So it's such a pleasure again to listen to you. I tell you, I feel so humbled to the expertise and the knowledge that we have here. So yes, there are questions coming in, but I would like to give the other speakers, a moment to share, because their presentation might address some of those questions. So at the end of all the speakers presenting, then we'll come back to the questions. So let me share our next speaker's profile. Okay, our next speaker is Komi Tsowou. He's an economist at the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And just back in August, he was one of our guest speakers at the Trade with Africa Business Summit, this year, the virtual edition. And I basically told him that his presentation in terms of the depth of the technical knowledge that he shared is the best in terms of the technical aspects that I've seen. And the way I try to describe it is that AfCFTA is like a car, a supercar, that has been delivered to us. Now we have to uncover it and say, how does it work? How does it move? It's like we now have to look at the user manual in order in the business world to be able to leverage it. So Komi, it's such an honor to have you again. I know you have something to share with us, so do take over. Komi.
Let me share my screen. Can you see the screen, please?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Thank you again, Toyin. Thank you. Thanks to all, Jean-Bertrand, Doc, Zeufack, and others for attending. And I think it's always good opportunities to discuss with everyone here. So today I'm going quickly into some of the technical points in practice, how the AfCFTA will influence concretely some of the sectors. I will focus on a few sectors, of course, because I think the AfCFTA is a game changer. There are not a lot of sectors that are going potentially to benefit from the AfCFTA. But in my presentation, I'm going to focus on few ones, and then we can, again, as Toyin said, we will continue the discussions within the trade community platform. So my name is Komi. I'm currently working with the Africa division of the UN Conference on Trade and Development, who has been a technical partner of the AUC, along with the UN Economic Commission for Africa, among others. To quickly, one of the key elements I really like to always show is how do we, as a continent in Africa, continue to depend on export of commodities. And the map you can see here, we have calculated the ratio of primary commodity export, including agricultural, minerals, oils, vis-a-vis total merchandise export. And by the ratio you can see in Africa, the ratio usually for most of the countries go beyond 60%. And most of the countries are within range of 80, 100%. And I think this is something you all know. And one of the key implications of this situation is that we usually, as Africans, suffer a lot of from the vagaries in the commodities market, which usually translate into volatility in prices and so and so. So that's one thing also I believe, and Jean-Bertrand mentioned that with the AfCFTA, the hope is that Africa will be able to add more value to its commodities before exporting them within Africa or with the rest of the world. Now, I'm not going into the AfCFTA framework because Jean-Bertrand has given us very detailed insight on that. But one key graph I want to show here on your left side is I computed the intra-African trade data. So in the blue, you will see that is the intra-African trade with regard to commodities, and in orange, intra-African trade with regard to manufactured goods. So what we are seeing here clearly is that among African countries, although the share of intra-African countries is low, what we trade most among ourselves are manufactured goods, actually, which means we trade mainly commodities with the rest of the world. So the expectation is that with the push from the AfCFTA, whether to removal or reduction in tariffs and non-tariff barriers, there will be a push to the manufacturing sector. The figure you saw on the right, we have actually done at ECA at the UN, which was also my previous institution, some simulation to see which sectors are likely to gain more from the AfCFTA. And what we have seen is actually industrial sectors that is likely to record more in terms of gain under the free trade area. We have also looked at the top 10 sectors that are likely to register or yield more gains within the AfCFTA framework. Of course, the first one is vehicle and transport equipment, because at present, most of our vehicle and transport equipment are imported from the rest of the world. But we have seen in recent years car manufacturer, big car manufacturer that are opening their hubs, production hubs in Africa, including, for example, South Africa, Northern Africa. We have also a planned new investment coming in Ghana, and so and so. The second product with high potential will related certainly to energy product, including oil, gas, and others, and their value-added product. We have few products, including sugar, chemicals, food products, wood and paper, milk and dairy, and textile, and so and so. So these are the top sectors with the AfCFTA when we look at a number of indicators, including tariffs, demand from the continent, and so and so. Now, moving to the next, what I want to show you here, I know I have put a lot of figures, but I really want to show you those facts. So in blue, it's what Africa currently imports within the continent. Vis-a-vis in red is what the continent imports from the world. So starting from petroleum oil, which is one of the biggest import, where Africa imports a lot from the world. And you can easily see here, despite the continent's endowment in terms of oil, crude oil, the import within Africa of processed oil is very limited vis-a-vis not even 20% approximately, vis-a-vis what is totally imported from the world. There are a number of other products, including motor vehicle and so spare parts. We even sugar. You can see that Africa imports a lot in terms of sugar from the rest of the world, vis-a-vis what is imported from within the continent. Rice, again, it's huge what we continue to import, mainly from Asia. Paper and paperboards, despite the huge potential in terms of wood product that can be processed into paper, the wood waste, we still rely a lot. When it comes to a number of other products, cotton, milk, cement, basically, it's what is showing clearly here is Africa, despite the rhetoric about industrialization and value addition, continue to depend mainly on the rest of the world. And what one lesson COVID has taught us is you become more vulnerable if you continue to depend to remote markets. So AfCFTA in that sense with having the potential to reduce Africa's import to the rest of the world through local or regional value chain is likely to reduce also the continent's vulnerability to the rest of the world. If we also take, I've here in the comments, some companies producing shea butter and so and so. So anything that look at also cosmetics and others, the market is huge in Africa. I usually give one example. If you go to Cote d'Ivoire, cocoa butter is processed in Cote d'Ivoire and sold in a small bottle, maybe in small pack, for $1 to $2. The same bottle, when it's imported to Ethiopia, which has a big market, a demand for shea butter and others, that same bottle costs 3 to 4 times, almost $10. So that's clearly showing that the market exists in Africa for African product. But again, most of those the issues that usually impede the trade beyond tariffs are mainly non-tariff barriers. If you want to ship a product from a cosmetic product from Cote d'Ivoire or from Togo, Ghana, shea butter to Ethiopia, for example, you have to use airline, which is more costly. So how do we make sure we have maritime routes, for example, among African countries? These are some of the things we have to look at within the context of AfCFTA implementation. For me, I also see a huge opportunity in cocoa to chocolate value chain. I really enjoyed this example, not only because we all love chocolate, but I think because Africa, including if you talk Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and some other countries, are the biggest producers of cocoa beans. But what we see on the first graph on our left here is actually how much is created along the cocoa value chains, from cocoa beans to cocoa paste, cocoa butter and powder, and then to the final product that is chocolate. And when you see, for example, in Cote d'Ivoire, most of the value, these are in percentage, most of the value, almost more than 70%, are created within the cocoa bean stage. And we all know that the higher values are not created at the lower stage, at the beans, but rather at the chocolate and cocoa butter and powder levels. At the same time, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brazil, which are also developing countries, are able to produce and retain, add more value to their cocoa product before they are exported toward regional and international market. So why are we in Africa, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Ghana, not able to produce, to add more value before we export those products? So there is a huge opportunity there, and a lot of countries, those producing countries, are now encouraging investors to really put their money into processing, into national markets before exporting them toward export market. But sometimes cocoa value chain is quite it's a bit special, because you want to keep product close to the export consumer market, which usually are still, the main one are still located in Asia, Europe, EU, and of course, US. So these are that's why sometimes we still see a lot of producing company located in those markets rather than Africa. But I think there is a huge potential in the value addition segment of the cocoa. And we have seen a number of investors, including African investors, whether in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and even Togo, which is quite small in terms of market, but is also producing, adding a lot of values. The B, the graph B, what is showing actually is what is being exported in regional market vis-a-vis a global market. And again, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, and Ghana, they are doing poorly because they are not producing toward continental market or regional market, while Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brazil, they are producing more toward their regional market. So how can AfCFTA change the current status with regard to cocoa value chain is something we need to look at, and how the AfCFTA probably is likely, the argument is likely to help African investors or investors from other countries also process more of those products within the continent. Second value chain or product sector I want to focus is medicinal and pharmaceutical product. Not only because COVID-19 has exposed the fragility of Africa's health system, including pharmaceuticals, to the rest of the world, but because when the COVID happened, and almost 80 countries have limited or banned export of medical supplies and some pharmaceutical products. So this has increased significantly, has put African continent at risk. Today, when we see what's happening in terms of imports or trades or production of pharmaceutical products, 95% of medicinal and pharmaceutical are coming from outside the continent. Despite, countries like South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Egypt, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe having local industrial capacity to manufacture medicine, especially generic and essential medicine. So this is where one area where we will see a lot of, push as well, because I think the head of states are very aware of the issue, and they are likely to push to settle, to have a number of incentive to the investor to, really put the money and manufacture a lot of pharmaceutical products within the continent. Another area, sectors, industry I see as a huge potential is the woods industry. Mainly in Central Africa and Western Africa today, the predominance, processing activity that's happening in the wood sector is still at the primary stage, with sowing and rotary cutting in most of the countries. The secondary processing, which includes moldings, profiles, packet, and so on, so is happening. I was in Gabon, and Gabon has, for example, built a huge special economic zone dedicated mainly to the processing of wood product. But the tertiary wood processing, which is joinery and cabinet making, is where there is still a lot of potential that is not exploited. So this will bring a number of investment opportunities with expanded market through the AfCFTA. I think we will, in Africa, we need bigger wood processing facilities, companies like IKEA today, which is international company. So how do we create African IKEA? That is one of the key issues. And we hope the AfCFTA bring some, solution to the investors. And of course, when we talk about the wood product, there is a huge potential for other byproducts, including pulp and paper. In terms of minerals and metals, there are a lot of potential as well. The pictures I'm showing here is what is being done in Gabon by one company that is processing manganese in Gabon to manganese metals and some other byproducts. So beyond South Africa, there are also, this is also to show that the mining, some countries are ready, they have invested a lot in getting energy or in supplying electricity, so that those mining production hub can operate efficiently. So it's not, in the dream anymore. These are things that are happening across the continent. In oil sectors, we all know that, what the figures are showing is we continue to export mainly crude petroleum, while at the same time, we import a lot as Africa refined petroleum product. I know, as you all know, Nigeria, Dangote has been taking steps towards, refining petroleum oil. But I think beyond Dangote, we should have other, investors that should able to put a lot of money into processing of petroleum. Beyond that, I think because we have seen increases a lot in vehicle and others over the past year, and this trend will continue to also increase. I'm seeing a lot of potential as well in base oil and lubricant for car and other machinery products. For example, estimates, puts forward that the African car market is likely to grow from 45 million in 2018 to over 135 million cars by 2040. So there is a huge demand for lubricant as well. Over the next probably 5 years, there are expectations that lubricant demand will increase from 1.7 million tons to 2 million. So these are critical areas where there is a huge demand. Services, I'm not going to take time on it because we all know, and this has been said by Jean-Bertrand as well, service today we are recording a huge servicification of whether trade, manufacturing sectors, and so and so. So services sectors are really enabler of the AfCFTA as well, from digital to energy, health, education, finance, tourism, infrastructure, and so and so. So to conclude quickly, what I want to point here is, yes, it's very important to look at all the dimensions of trade and production, from investment, trade facilitation, trade infrastructure, and for countries import defense. How do you also make sure you are assisting, you provide necessary support to some of those sectors to grow? In terms of tariff schemes, I think Jean-Bertrand mentioned that countries have to open, their market when it comes to intra-African trade, reduction of tariffs over a certain period, till total dismantlement, rule of origins, which are very critical to tell you exactly under which condition a product that is processed within the continent will then be able to benefit from the tariff advantage within the AfCFTA. So as you know, not all the products will get the preferential treatment under the AfCFTA. They have to contain a minimum of values to be able to trade freely under the continent. There are the percentage of value content in terms of what value it has to contain that originate from the continent may vary to product 30% to 45%. So it really depends. Once the rule of origins are finally concluded, I think you will be able to really see what is required from each of the products. But of course, there will be some challenges because today there are a number of trade agreements signed, ratified by African countries. So how do you play among, those trade rules are going to be important. But for the private sectors, what I really want to insist on is market prospection. I think is critical. There are a number of trade fairs, including, for example, the Intra-African Trade Fair, organized now every year by the Afrexim Bank. There are a number of trade exhibition conferences to build awareness vis-a-vis what the AfCFTA is offering. Countries' competitiveness, I think one of the key important decisions for the diaspora or for any investor is to see within the AfCFTA market, within the continent, where to invest. What will then be the determinants of investment among African countries? You will have labor. For example, Ethiopia has a huge advantage in terms of a cost of labor. In other countries like Kenya, it really, you have more expensive labor, but you have access to, for example, digital tools and instruments and so and so. So it will be very important, even when you go to West Africa, can you, where to produce? Will you set your factory in Togo and Ghana and then focus, or target Nigerian, Cote d'Ivoire, Malian market? So these are some of the things that will be possible under the AfCFTA. Beyond even ECOWAS market, when you are operating in West Africa, you'll be able even to target South African market, Namibia, Cameroon. So, so market prospects will be very important, but also the decision to where to invest. And I really want to emphasize here on the implementation, because I think the private sector is the one that has to produce toward AfCFTA market. And I quickly want to show you one of the online tool that was mentioned by Jean Bertrand, which is being developed by African Union in support by the UN Conference on Trade and Development. So basically, this is an online mechanism that anyone can access and register, and any complaint you might have when it comes to non-tariff barriers. But for example, you are blocked for any reason at the border, you can fill the form, and then automatically the focal point in your country will be able to see the kind of complaint you are raising and contact the vis-a-vis, the partner in the import countries, to see how they can quickly resolve the issue. So the AfCFTA is not a dream. So there are a number of instruments, I think Jean Bertrand also mentioned them, that are being developed or developed already to support intra-African trade as well as production. I will stop there. Thank you very much.
Oh, wow. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This is amazing. Thank you. And I know you've shared and sent that to me. We're also going to make this information available to everyone on our network, the Trade with Africa network. So thank you for that. On that, I'm going to move on to the next speaker. We're going to come to questions at the end of all the presentations. So thank you, Komi, again. I know you're joining us from Addis. What's the time now in Addis?
It's 6:30 p.m., but so it's still okay.
It's still okay. Yeah, the last time it was like 9:10 p.m.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to move on to. Okay, I'm going to stop your sharing now, or do you want to stop?
No,
okay.
Yes, you can stop, please.
Fine. Okay, good. Okay, I hope everyone is having a good time and you're seeing the information that is such a robust knowledge. And our next speaker is Professor Landry Signé. I know I may not have said your name well, but he's senior director and full professor at Thunderbird University and senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. I celebrate this next speaker. He's recognized as World Economic Forum Young Global Leader. He has won over 60 prestigious awards. He's one of the most brilliant minds when it comes to the topic of the day. And Professor Landry, it's such an honor. I tell you, because of people like you, I am so, I'm certain that the future of Africa is guaranteed because of people like you. So you have the floor. Please go ahead with your presentation.
Hello, everyone. And thank you very much, Toying, for this very kind introduction. Please, I think you are raising the expectations. So I will ask everyone to reduce those expectations. So today
quick question. Are you able to share, or can everybody see you? Good.
Wonderful. So are you able to see me? All okay?
I'm sorry to interrupt, but Toyon, your screen sharing is still on.
It's still on. Okay, I'm trying to.
And it's on my slide.
Yes, we cannot see Professor Landry.
So there's something going on with the screen here. The meeting, it's kind of hung up like Zoom. I can hear people, but I'm not seeing the Zoom. Let me see if I need to. I don't know what will happen if I close it and reopen it. But I can hear everybody. Let's see. Technology.
You just need to stop sharing your screen.
Yeah, it's not giving me that button. I feel something has hung up somewhere. It's not giving me the button to stop sharing. Okay, I think, yeah, it's not giving me the screen.
Where it says share, just below.
Yeah.
You have your cursor now. Just move to the, is it the far right?
No, I think Zoom is having an issue because I've been sharing and unsharing since, but okay. Zoom on my screen it doesn't like me today. So
exit the full screen.
Exit the full screen. Nope. It's hung up actually. The computer is hung up. But I can hear everybody. Let me see if I can close this out and then see if I can quickly get back on. I apologize for this technical difficulty. Just give me a moment. Thank you. Yeah, I may need to quit and then come back in and close the screen. Okay, Jean, I'm going to Professor Lo. I will assign you and
so hello everyone, are you able to see now?
We see you, Prof.
Wonderful. So I think that Toyin has assigned me
yes.
the co-host status.
Yes,
so,
I'm back now. You can go on, but I did assign you as host. I needed to close out the screen completely. Please, Prof, go on.
Oh, wonderful. So thank you again very much, Toyin, for organizing this extremely important event. I also want to commend the previous speaker, Dr. Zeufack, Bertrand, Komi, wonderful speeches, and I really look forward also to hear from Shakira. So let me start with a couple of African proverbs. So one, so wisdom is like a baobab tree. No one individual can embrace it. In other words, it's critical to trade with one another on the African continent. And the African Continental Free Trade Area really offer that unique opportunity. Jean-Bertrand, can you mute, please? Jean-Bertrand, can you mute, please? Thank you. So on the second one, not everyone who chases the zebra caught it, but he who caught it chased it. So the CFTA is like chasing a zebra. So it's an extremely important goal which has been adopted. However, only its successful implementation will allow the achievement of its full potential. As a matter of fact, the significance of the African Continental Free Trade Area cannot be overstated. Africa really has an opportunity to show leadership at the world stage in trade affairs with strength through unity. Contrary to what is happening in many countries around the world, we have heard about the Brexit, the US-China wars, among others. But this potential could only be achieved if the CFTA is successfully implemented. And although we really have a unique momentum, smart choices, policy options should really guide the road ahead successful implementation. So let me speak perhaps about 2 or 3 elements. So first, why is it so important? What could be the potential consequences of the CFTA on Africa in general? Why is it a great solution, including in the relation between Africa and the rest of the world, and what are the next steps in terms because the CFTA offer a framework for free trade, but in order to trade, entrepreneurs have to produce, and investors have to really unlock the business potential. And I think Jean Bertrand, Komi, and Dr. Zeufack have highlighted some of these points. So, as pointed out, Africa only represents about 2.4%, let's say less than 3% of total global export. And even if intra-African trade only represents about 17% of total African export, you can compare with other regions like Asia, Europe, which are around 59, 69 among others. And when we speak about trade, and one thing that the CFTA is really doing outstandingly in terms of addressing tariffs, but it is not just about tariff on the continent. For example, in 2018, he was talking about only 4 documents to export from France, where he was taking from 9 to 10 documents to export from Angola and Congo. So you can clearly see that tariffs are extremely important, but non-tariff barriers could eventually even be much more important. So another point which is really important, the limited intra-African trade has really have an impact on African industrial development, on poverty level, on job creation, especially for the young population. As you know, over 70% of the region population, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, is below the age of 35, and 70% of Africa youth live on less than $2 a day. So the CFTA was really not an option. And when we think also about informal cross-border traders, women represent about 70% of informal cross-border traders, and they used to face tremendous challenges when selling their product in a different country. So the CFTA will definitively help addressing some of those core challenges. So, of course, many people have spoken about the potential of the CFTA. The UNCTAD has, for example, highlighted the economic output, which can raise by $29 trillion by 2050. In my own book, Unlocking Africa Business Potential, I have identified pre-COVID the combined consumer and business spending, which could reach about $6.7 trillion by 2030. And Komi was highlighting also a very important point. We need investors, we need traders, we need entrepreneurs. Nothing will happen if we don't have those entrepreneurs which are really seizing the opportunity, creating the products and services which will therefore being traded. So those are really important aspects related to trade. And when we speak about services, for example, at the Brookings institutions, with some of my colleagues, we have spoken about industries without smokestacks and the critical importance of those industries. As a matter of fact, export in related industries have grown six times faster than traditional manufacturing from 1998 to 2015. So it's really important, and those were inclusive of ICT-based technologies or industries, and you have tourism, agri-industry, among other sectors. So those are really important to highlight, because the CFTA has the opportunity to unlock Africa's tremendous business potential, accelerating industrialization, economic diversification, quality job creation, including for young people, for women, the development of SMEs who represent about 80% of jobs on the continent, while contributing also to sustain an inclusive economic growth, which are critical to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal and Agenda 2063. Now, having said that, you have numerous key, what are the key to successful implementation of the CFTA. So the challenge to scale up and to speed up the continental integration and the successful implementation of the CFTA lies with governments, but also regional institutions, who should work with the business community, with investors, with international partners. So national policy maker really working with business, civil society, international partner should really unlock and adopt a continental-wide approach or standard to prioritize free trade, economic diversification, and industrial and technological development. And that will also require investment in developing human capital, infrastructure, which are critical to trade, investment and education. So I may speak about the negotiation phases, but I think Jean Bertrand has outstandingly covered them. So I will pass, but I want to point three key strategies which are important though. So I identify in some of my other book, African Development, African Transformation, how institutions shape development strategies, which were released by Cambridge University Press, some core elements, which include the effective coordination and delivery mechanism. I'm very excited. I've been engaging with the African Union for a long time on the African Continental Free Trade Area, and the new Secretary General, His Excellency Wamkele. So they have really been doing an outstanding work in the coordination. Of course, member states have the critical responsibility to really be better involved in accelerating the implementation. So we have the compliance and dispute resolution mechanism, especially the ability to enforce penalty for non-compliant countries. And I think quite often in the past for previous initiative on the continent, they have failed because non-compliant members were not sanctioned. So I think it is really important to engage and discuss those points very clearly. So the financing is also critical. Domestic and continental resources mobilization is critical. And of course, you have the international financing. You have different partners, the United States, the European Union, and within the European Union, Germany, for example, have played an important role. South Korea also has been a strong supporter. China is also exploring better support. So definitively, international support is critical, but it's important not to be over dependent on international financing and to really create domestic mechanisms at the national, sub-regional, and continental level. And as pointed out by Albert as well, political will, leadership, accountability. So yes, we with the African Continental Free Trade Area, we need ordinary people who can do extraordinary things. But let me say that for having engaged with many of the people involved in the CFTA creation and now implementation, we have many extraordinary people able to achieve extraordinary things. So we are watching, and we really want you not to, we really want you to achieve the CFTA at its fullest potential. So extremely important. Especially as you are not ordinary, you are extraordinary. So there's no reason for not achieving extraordinary outcome. So some specific aspects which will need to be addressed include the prevention of trade deflection. So trade deflection is in fact the movement of goods or components of goods from outside a trading arrangement to a country within such an arrangement for the seller to benefit from trading preferences. So many people were very concerned about the partnership between Kenya, for example, and the United States. So it's really important for African partners to really support the continental initiative and not try to go around by having deals. And not to say that other deals are not possible, but they have to be done with respect of the CFTA. So of course, measures have been taken, but I think more may be also done on addressing the vast disparity among African countries. As you know, over 50% of the African GDP is contributed by 3 countries, Egypt, Nigeria, and South Africa. And if you compare with Africa's 6 sovereign islands, which only collectively contribute to 1% of the GDP at the continental level. And about 17 countries in Africa do not have in place, for example, competition legislations, where we have about 23 which do, but with the remaining falling somewhere in between. So it's really important to think about those because they will be, they can constitute challenges when implementing. But now let me, for the last points on my remarks, highlight the critical importance of addressing key drivers of successful industrial policies to increase trade under the CFTA. So I think Komi also highlighted, he showed many elements related to various sectors in which Africa can be competitive. Without industrialization, without a diversification of African economies, it will be extremely difficult, even if the CFTA is successfully implemented, for it to bring a tremendous value or in changing the life of Africans. So that's why the successful implementation of the CFTA is one thing and will be enhanced by a successful industrialization and production at the local level. And there, many factors are important. Human capital. So it is critical to really revisit education curricula to focus on skills acquisition for the future of work and build capacity for entrepreneurship, for self-employment through business training at an early age, skill updating for an advanced age, and better promotion of science, technology, engineering, entrepreneurship, and mathematics, among others. In my forthcoming book on Africa's role in the 4th Industrial Revolution, I highlight the critical importance of some of those elements. So it's also important to address cost. So in order to accelerate industrial development, policymakers must really bring the cost of doing business down, addressing cost effectiveness challenges such as energy, access to road and ports, security, financing. They should also reduce bureaucratic restrictions, corruption, dispute settlement, and property rights, among others. So those elements are really critical to reduce the cost of doing business, to better attract African investor and international investor as well. The supply network have to be addressed. Industry are more likely to evolve in the presence of sufficient or competitive networks. So, and policymakers should increase the size of those supply network by easing trade restriction and integrating regional trade network, and increasing the country's ability to really develop sophisticated products and lifting the barrier to small and medium and business growth and development. So economic sophistication is also extremely important, not only economic diversification. We have to have more sophisticated economies, and a focus on demands is critical. Policymakers should offer tax incentives to firms in order to both unlock job creation and increase individual and household income. And the increase in domestic demand will also contribute to create a pan-African demand, which ultimately is critical for both the success of the African Continental Free Trade Area on one hand, but also to attract better investors from around the world. We have the resources which are critical. Manufacturing, for example, require heavy investment and should be driven by the private sector. So policymakers should also there facilitate access to finance, especially for small and medium enterprises, for women, for young people, by developing and effectively managing instruments appropriate to the stage of development, whether they are loans, guarantees, or venture funds in critical sector. And in order to better attract, let's say, foreign direct investor, policymakers should address the poor risk perception that scares off potential investors. So do we have a mismatch between the actual risk of doing business in Africa and the perceived one per investor around the world? So a strategy should be adopted by regional institutions, but also countries to really bridge the gap between those elements. Of course, I can expand more. I know that I have to leave the floor to Shakira, but to conclude, I can clearly, I cannot highlight enough the critical importance of implementation. I think all of us, whether Dr. Zeufack, Bertrand, Komi, have been highlighting this. And I hope those steps will really lay a solid foundation, whether for African leaders, regional communities, the continental and international institution to partner in supporting the African continental free trade area. We are stronger together. So thank you very much for your attention.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much. Wow. So our next speaker is Shakira, but I'm not going to share my screen again. Ms. Shakira is the Trade Commissioner for the South African Consulate here in Chicago. And over the last couple of years, we've also been involved in some of our platforms at the Trade with Africa Business Summit. Ms. Motan has previously served as the South African mission in the United Arab Emirates, as well as managed Asia East and Middle East Export Promotion Desk at Trade and Investment South Africa, a division of the South African Department of Trade and Industry. She has worked in markets such as China, Japan, Hong Kong, South Korea, Taiwan, Gulf states, the Levant, and Turkey. I tell you, Ms. Shakira is amazing. Like I shared previously, the full profile of each of our speakers is available on the Trade with Africa Network. But with that, I'll just yield right now to Ms. Shakira. Please do move on with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toyon, for this opportunity. Good day to everybody. I must apologize for my voice in advance. I'm a bit under the weather. It's becoming cold in Chicago. But I want to thank the esteemed panelists for such detailed and technical information and presentations that have been shared. It's very exciting to learn about all of the developments and the progress that have been made to date. And I must say that it makes me wish that I was already back in South Africa to harness the various opportunities that, of course, do not come without challenges, but definitely at the end of the day, there are opportunities for all of us to harness.
Ms. Shakira, sorry
yes.
to interrupt you. I just wanted to ask if you would like to show us your face with your video or not.
I must apologize. As I mentioned, that I am feeling a bit under the weather. So I usually have my mask on to show that we need to be safe in the USA, especially in the Midwest.
Okay, thank you so much. Yes.
Thank you. Excuse me. So I want to start off by saying that, you know, South Africa, there were 3 points that I was asked to speak on, and I want to echo a lot of the sentiments that the former panel members have echoed. And I want to say that it's very important to note from a South African perspective that apart from Nigeria and Angola, which currently supply South Africa with oil, South Africa mainly trades with Namibia, Botswana, and Mozambique, which is part of the Southern African Development Community. And most of the goods traded between South Africa and other SADC members are already duty-free. Africa only accounts for a quarter of South African exports and only 12% of imports, of which oil is represented by half of this. So it's very important for us that we are part of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and we are very much looking forward to January next year, because this free trade area will allow for greater trade due to the elimination of tariff barriers, Also, local South African companies can seek to include businesses from other African countries into the value chains that already exists in South Africa, hence creating opportunities for all. And then it would enable other African countries to become part of those larger value chains. Our president, who is a chairman of the African Union, stated in July that the African Union is planning on improving industrial output through the establishment of a regional value chain with the aid of private sector stakeholders. We understand that government cannot be successful on its own. We need to collaborate with the private sector and have those stakeholders working together with us. According to President Ramaphosa, the African Free Trade Agreement, Continental Free Trade Agreement, is the best tool that can help the continent to speed up its regional economic integration and also to battle the effects of the pandemic. This will enable us to have one large competitive market with inclusive, sustainable development for all our people. As mentioned before, internal trade in Africa is just 17 or 15%. And if you compare to Europe, 70%, and Asia's 58%, we really need to change that urgently. What South Africa has been doing, even prior to discussions, is that in April 2016, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition created an organization called Trade and Invest Africa. And this aims to coordinate and implement South Africa's economic strategy for Africa, which is premised on the development integration approach. So this initiative will focus on advancing the priorities for Africa set out in South Africa's Industrial Policy Action Plan and the National Export Strategy, as well as the opportunities uncovered through the continental trade negotiations. Trade and Investment Africa aims to create a closer relationship between South African government and the private sector to take advantage of export and investment opportunities on the continent. It is also mandated to contribute to increasing the levels of intra-African trade by facilitating not just South African exports of value-added goods and services, but also creating sourcing relationships for imports from other African markets. And the focus is on companies, large, but also medium and small, and in providing access to capital, access to markets, as well as non-financial support. And the South African development finance institutions, such as the Industrial Development Corporation and the Development Bank of South Africa, are keenly engaged in many of these projects. I also want to add that we do understand that with trade comes the imperative to ensure that infrastructure is being created. And besides the domestic infrastructure announcements and the infrastructure projects that South Africa is involved in, we do believe that joint collaborative projects between the different countries are key for that. South Africa heads the Bureau of African Ministers of Trade, and the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Minister Patel, has been elected as the chair of the body that was tasked with finalizing negotiations in terms of the commencement of the preferential trade area under the African Continental Free Trade Area. He chaired the first meeting on the 30th of September, which confirmed the commitment of the countries to the start of the trade on the 1st of January 2021. And what he stated here was something really important, given the current environment that we're living, which is under the pandemic. And he said that the pandemic experience drew two basic lessons for us. And the one is that social solidarity is critical in fighting the pandemic and the economic reconstruction that will follow. And it must be at the heart of all our efforts. We would definitely be stronger working together rather than in isolation. The second is that economic resilience is critical. We need, as mentioned by all of the panelists, we need to build Africa's industrial capabilities and trade and supply chains between the African countries. So each of us needs a strong Africa, and an Africa that has deeper levels of industrialization, meaning that there would be more jobs for young people and greater wealth creation. And definitely the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is the means, but effective implementation is key. So we believe that the free trade agreement will create opportunities and benefits for all nations of the continent, and it will enable various companies to expand their markets by exporting of goods and services across the continent. It will also contribute to growth and diversification of the economy, and this was mentioned by the other panelists as well, and therefore it will create jobs as well as to reduce inequality and unemployment. It has the potential to be a game changer for the continent on all levels. It will act as a catalyst for economic growth and will benefit entrepreneurs, including all sizes of business. So those are my concluding statements. And I want to say that I would be so excited to return to South Africa within the next few months, which is where I'm going to be going because my term ends here in Chicago. But I truly believe that as African countries, if we are to engage more with each other in terms of trade and investment, we would be able to stimulate so much of growth and job opportunities across the continent. All of the resources are available to us as Africans, and value addition needs to occur inside of Africa and not outside. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Shakira, and I hope you do feel better soon. So I'm just doing a time check. What I would now like to do is share briefly what we at Nazaru we're doing to advance the AfCFTA and if not just regional, but also global trade with Africa. For those who joined us mid or towards the end, my name is Toyin Umesiri again. I'm the host, and my company put this engagement together. But for those who may not know me, my background is in supply chain logistics, strategic development. And before we set out to establish Nazaru to support trade with Africa, I actually served working at the world's largest company, Walmart, helping with strategy. But one of the things I want to really talk about now is the number one skill gap that we've seen, which is the skill gap. So when you talk about strategic vision, you've heard our speakers talk about the vision, the why of the AfCFTA. You've heard our speakers talk about the technicalities. We've talked about South Africa and what they are doing to establish. But one of the biggest skill gap is what I would say, how do you personalize all of this? For everybody listening to me, the big question is now, what does that mean to you? What does that mean to your role? What does that mean to your responsibility? What does that mean to your business? Here is what we are finding. For several years now, we've been bringing global stakeholders together, and we're finding that that is not enough. Bringing ourselves together in forums and network, which we are leading on, is not enough. What we're seeing is that there's a skill gap of taking the strategic vision and implementing it. And that skill gap is what is going to take us to industrialize, to develop the Africa of the future, to make sure that the human capital that we have can support our dream plan. So, for example, when US said we want to put a man on the moon, that's the vision. But if it's not supported with financing, with humans, with resources, with capacity, then it's just a dream that goes nowhere. One of the things I also talk about is why I'm extremely passionate and taking a lead role in driving this conversation is because I have seen a somewhat failed policy. For example, AGOA, the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which opened the US market. I'm here right now in Chicago. AGOA opened the US market to Africa for 20 years. And we all know what has happened. and what has not happened. We all know that eliminating tariff is one step. We also have non-tariff barriers, which is where the real work lies. Coming together, partnering, improving our skills, collaborating, these are the things that is going to only move us forward. Along that line, we at Nazaru, we've made a commitment over the next 1 year to train our policymakers and our business executives in terms of trade and investment facilitation. Coming this weekend, in partnership with the African Union, I'll be delivering a first line of training to our economic officers. If you haven't received that communication from the Trade Ministry of the African Union, please reach out to us. We'll be able to pass you a free access if you're a government official. But that's what we are doing. That's what's next, is that we are now armed with information. We're armed with resources to know this is a game changer for the continent of Africa. But my challenge to everybody listening is, what are you going to do? What role are you going to play in advancing the continent of Africa? Thank you so much. I'll now take a few questions on our trade platform, the Trade with Africa platform. We've already had some very fantastic questions. One of it was, and I'm going to throw this out to our honorable speakers, would be around the role of women. Jean, I think you might, I'll pass this to you first, because given the seats and your front row seats to actualizing the AfCFTA, how are we factoring women, given the role they currently play in the informal sector, as we're trying to formalize trade within the continent? What tangible things is the African Union doing to engage women? Jean, if you're still on, would you be able to share with us? And I know there are ministries within African Union, and if you just want to refer us to the right people, we'll be happy to take note of that and pass it on as well. Jean, are you still on? Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Thank you, Toyin, and thank you to all the co-panelists for, their brilliant interventions. With respect to the issue of gender, of course, like you said, we have a women and gender directorate, which handles gender issues within the continent in general. But speaking to the AfCFTA, gender was recognized as promotion of gender, or women in trade, was recognized in the provisions of the agreement, in particular the preamble. So it is very clear that we have women in perspective, as we talked about, making trade a transformative tool for Africa's development. Now, a couple of things that will be very useful for women. The first one relates to what is known as the AfCFTA Simplified Trading Regime. Now, we all know that cross-border trade is very important on the continent. We know that informal trade is also very important. And we all also know that women actually constitute those who are the most involved in cross-border trade and informal trade on the continent. So by implementing the AfCFTA Simplified Trade Regime, we should be able to, further facilitate trade by women, most of whom are involved in the either the informal sector or in cross-border trade across the continent. The other issue is when it comes to awareness. We are convening. We've been convening the AfCFTA Civil Society Forum with an emphasis on women, to make sure that they are aware of the opportunities and that they receive all the information that is needed to tap into the AfCFTA potential. So those are on top of my head, some of the critical issues. But like I said, the most important one, and we'll see how it hopefully, it will really work out well, is this AfCFTA simplified trade regime, which will be implemented and which will help really formalize or bring informal trade, which is dominated by women, and also cross-border trade into formal trade. I think these are, some of the quick answers that I can provide. Wow. But I'm sure my other colleagues can also step in. I don't want to dwell on, the experts who are recruited to work with us to mainstream women in trade, because that's, policy development. But, I just wanted to touch on those very practical things that bring on the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me as well, there has been several conversations, but I'm going to pull them all to one as one question. We've heard people talk about industrialization, transportation in terms of movement of goods and people around the continent. We've talked about innovation. We've talked about all of that. But how I'm going to ask this question is, I feel like we all have a feeling and we know what has to happen. The question I have is, where's the money going to come from? Where's the investment going to come from? Have we identified where it's going to come from? And what are we doing to build a strategy to market Africa to those players? Because that's what I see from my viewpoint here, is as we engage with foreign investors, investors are looking for return on investment. And what we are finding is that maybe we are not telling the story that they want to hear, or maybe they don't know enough about the potential. And this is something that has to be ongoing. In terms of investment promotion, is not something that you do once and you never do again. So we all know, between all of us here and the people online, we know what has to happen. We know the dreams we have. We know our aspirations as Africans. The question is, how? How is this going to happen? Komi, I know, do you want to jump in on that? And then I'll give it as well to others to join, because I want to group those questions because of time. Go on. Anyone can pick it, Komi or Jean.
Okay, so can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, so yes, I think one of the key issue is where is the money coming from? In terms of investment performance, I think that's one we agree on. I don't know if you have seen the last ranking on greenfield performance of greenfield investments across the world, and you have top African countries topping. Actually, I was surprised to see that Togo is the first one in I think the last year. So, and you have a lot of countries, Rwanda and others. So in terms of investment, performance, I think the continent will do well, although sometimes people say it's risky, but then if you need higher return, you need to also take more risk. But the issue is, where is the money coming from? I think Jean-Bertrand has mentioned some of the initiative, Afrexim Bank. And I remember in August, the Afrexim Bank intervention, they mentioned it clearly that they are putting money there as well. Some countries as well are pushing towards, funding some of the AfCFTA initiative toward, intra-African trade. But I think that's something we should look at as well. How do we make money available? Because if AfCFTA is not only for Africans, we have a lot of international investors from China. So someone who is getting, 2-3% rate in China or in Europe, how do you compete when you are accessing some of the country here? The credit rate is even beyond 10%. I think about minimum is 11% in Nigeria. So how do you compete? Because, so these are some of the things I think there are some, the Development Bank, ADB and others are putting money, but I think how do we support the SMEs? because their SMEs are not likely to get those funds from the Afrexim Bank and others. I think this is something countries should really look at, and why not creating special funds for SMEs dedicated to those producing to our FCFTA market. Thanks.
Fantastic. Yes, thank you. Jean?
I'm not sure, Prof?
Actually, because of time now, they've just sent me a message. They have another meeting, so I'm also trying to wrap up as well, because one of the things is that the conversation is going to move into the network. I know, Komi, you're on there. You would have seen some of the questions that was already posted on the network. So please, if you can also help us respond in the network. Some of the questions we're not responding to here, I usually move them to the network, because with Zoom, when the event ends, the questions goes away. But we do have a platform, Nazaru.trade, where there are hundreds of people all over the world, experts that are already engaging. But so Jean, if you can help us wrap this up because of time, and then we will move this to the network.
Okay. No, thank you so much. I think, and thank you, Komi, for those comments. A couple of things. First, we've got the AfCFTA adjustment facility. I spoke about, the $1 billion initial fund. So what is going to happen is, once the fund is established, the facility is established, we will then mobilize, resources from other partners. Toyin, I think usually when I hear people saying, where is money going to come from talking about Africa, I laugh. Do you know that if we were to curb illicit financial flows on the continent, you know how much we'll be saving and we'll be able to reutilize per year? Close to $90 billion. That's more than what any partner is giving the continent. So we just need to be a bit more serious. And the good thing is we have a trend on the continent. We have a number of African leaders who are very, very foresight. They know where exactly they want to take their countries, and they are. So that's the first thing. The second thing, so in addition to the investment, the AfCFTA adjustment facility, we have, we are working on curbing illicit financial flows, which will help countries save some money and be able to reinvest that money, in the productive sector and in their respective economies. The other issue is, the investment protocol. Now, some of the investors, even African investors, are a bit skeptical when it comes to the business enabling environment on the continent. Now, when we eventually come up with the protocol on investment, it will provide a framework, provide the legal certainty, the assurances that investors need, in order to invest. So we're also likely to see sustainable investment flowing in the continent. And as a matter of fact, it has started. You have some companies which are investing already on the continent in anticipation for the AfCFTA. Let me just give you one example. Volkswagen over the past couple of years has, open assembling factories in Rwanda. And there are talks about, operating in other parts of the continent. So it is a trend that we will see. Like Komi said, this is the time real investors are actually already setting foot on the continent. Those who are very skeptical, they will continue to be skeptical. Don't forget, only 20% actually make things happen in life. You have a large number who are just out there. Some will join when things are happening, but the large majority are just shaking their head, wondering what is happening. So I think what we should really focus on, and like I said, our private sector, especially the SMEs, they need to understand one thing. It is time to start thinking about partnerships, joint ventures, whether it's within the continent or with investors from outside the continent. And the African diaspora, there is a lot of money there. This is also the time to come back and invest on the continent. Return on investment is very, very, very high. There are some countries which have put in place, schemes to attract the African diaspora. Ghana is one of them. And I'm sure very soon other countries will follow suit. So it's just about all the segment of the population, in turn, within the continent, but also outside the continent, saying, look, guys, Africa has been exploited for so long. Africa is now putting in place one of the largest market since the formation of the World Trade Organization. We want to be part of it this time around, because if we miss this other opportunity, we'll have to wait I don't know how many other centuries, and nobody wants to miss it. Even you, Toyin, it is time to think about mobilizing some of your friends, starting something on the continent. You know what, even people working in the public sector like myself, the thinking is, as we talked about the AfCFTA, it is early retirement. It is not to be doing this forever, because Africa is the continent of the future. And my hope is that beyond these panel discussions that we are having, that some of us will eventually, go to the private sector and capture some of those gains. So with that, I thank you once again, Toyin. I think you're doing something very commendable. We also hope to have more people in the diaspora playing this kind of role, raising awareness and making sure that the AfCFTA really succeed. Failure is not an option this time around.
No,
I thank you.
Thank you so much. It's not an option. And absolutely, I am already involved. Part of this work, there's a public side to this work in mobilizing people, but privately, we're dealing in brands, in product distribution. We're integrating African ethnic brands, and we're introducing skincare and all of that. So yes, I am, that's my background. If you remember last year when you came, the pouches were actually brought in using trade policies. So we're actively involved. I think one of my commitments is to bring as many people on that journey with myself and my company, leveraging the vehicle that my company provides, is that Toyin knows what Toyin needs to do, given my background working for the world's largest company, which is a $500 billion company, building strategy in that space. The reason I stepped away and moved into this space is to say, I think this is a space that could use that background and that knowledge. And I tell you, there's no looking back. So I am committed to Africa. Nazaru is committed to also empowering and enabling all that are committed to Africa and that want to get involved. So do check us out. On that note, I want to say a big thank you. I also acknowledge our various embassies around the world that joined, our economic officers. Like I said, we have activities planned. And then coming in November, we're working with the government of Nigeria to launch the Nigeria Investment Conference. Nigeria is the largest economy on the continent. And as we usually hold the Trade with Africa Business Summit, what we are seeing is that the investors are saying, where do we land our interest? What country do we land our interest? So we've looked at the continent, but we are now looking at opportunity zones and opportunity areas. And I'm happy to be working with the Consulate of Nigeria out of New York come November 24. And then finally, this platform that we've just launched, the AfCFTA Roundtable, is going to be a quarterly engagement. The next one will be January 26th, Tuesday. So we're putting that date on our calendar. And at that time, we know that by January 1, there will be trading. So we will want to see how that has gone. So that's why this platform, we had to create it. It's just 4 times a year. Let's come together quickly. How is it going? What do we need to know? And how do we put that information together? And this content will be made, the presentations and this content and our speaker profile, we will move it on to the platform. So thank you again for everyone all over the world that joined us. Great thanks to our speakers from World Bank to United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, to the African Union, to Brookings Institution, to South African Consulate. I thank you. I'm humble that I was privileged to do this. God willing, I'll see you again on this same platform, January 26th. Have a great rest of your week. Bye.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.